It's 6 p.m. on the dot. We'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Sonoma County Wildfire Protection Plan public review meeting. The update for the CWPP was led by Permit Sonoma Fire Prevention Division with help from Fire Safe Sonoma, CAL FIRE, and our project contractor, Digital Mapping Solutions. It was also funded by the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Grant Program and administered by Cal OES. For those who may need Spanish interpretation, it is available for you. Just go ahead and click on the interpretation button on the bottom of your screen. Just select your language, and then you can only listen to the interpreted language if you'd like by clicking on the mute original audio. So again, hello. Thank you for sharing your evening with us. We're going to go ahead and next slide. Do a quick Zoom review for those who may need it. If you have any questions during the presentation or during the Q&A session, please use the chat function. If you can also raise your hand if you have any questions during the presentation or during the Q&A section. Also, be sure to use the mute button during the Q&A session when you're not talking. And we also ask that you state your name before asking your question. That way we can directly talk to you versus doing a, general answer. Next. So the purpose for this public review is to engage county residents in the review process for the public draft of the Sonoma County CWPP and the meaningful implementation of it. The outcomes that we're expecting from this meeting is to make sure that county residents have a general understanding of what the CWPP includes and how it can be used, have a better understanding of the wildfire risk index that was created for the CWPP, more to that later, and have a better understanding of the CWPP priority project list and project tracker and how it includes projects. We are also going to go over how to submit comments for the public draft of the CWPP, and the team will receive any of your initial feedback and about the draft if you've read it yet. And we'll also make sure to incorporate edits as appropriate into the draft CWPP. So for tonight's agenda, we're going to go over, I just did the welcome. I'll introduce our fearless CWPP leader in just a moment, and then we'll have presentations, and then we'll have a robust Q&A session at the end. And now I'd like to introduce Caroline Safford, our fearless leader for the CWPP.
I am Caroline Safford, and just for the record, I am not fearless. I do work for Permit Sonoma in the Fire Prevention Division. And one of my hobbies there in my job is to get this CWPP updated. The 2016 version was basically out of date the day after we signed it off because 2016 was followed by 2017 and everything changed. What is a CWPP? A CWPP was originally defined in the United States Congress Healthy Forest Restoration Act of 2003. There were only 3 requirements that they lined in the HFRA document. One was that it had to be collaborative and include input from stakeholders from federal all the way down to community levels. It has to identify areas for hazardous fuels reduction and recommend types and methods for treatment. And it needs to recommend measures to reduce the ignitability of structures, which is my favorite part. That was advanced thinking in 2003. That's become fairly common now, but at the time that was pretty advanced thinking. The purpose of a CWPP is to bring together wildland-urban interface residents or people at risk to wildfire to collaboratively identify wildfire issues and risks and prioritize areas and strategies that we can use to reduce those risks. CWPP is really a pathway to solutions rather than a solution itself. For example, a CWPP does not create specific evacuation plans. It does provide a place where you can list the need for those kinds of plans, so that if somebody wants to seek funding to do that, the project is listed in a CWPP and will be more fundable from agencies. Basically, what we want this to do is help prioritize and implement high priority projects that have been collaboratively developed with input from all stakeholders. The 2016 CWPP, this is draft 2 of that update. The original draft was updated following at least 2 meetings and 5 supervisory districts, with a lot of input from our steering committee and agencies across the county. After all of that input, and there was quite a bit, it was revised to be the document that hopefully most of you have seen today. We did get a lot of comments. Every comment was reviewed, and wherever feasible and appropriate for the requirements of the CWPP were reflected in the document. The comments were pretty wide-ranging, with suggested edits concerning issues about equity, environmental concerns, funding needs, education, implementation. We'll be talking more about that, and about the document itself. One of the strongest repeated comments was that, boy, this thing is long. So one of the things that we did in our draft 1 revision was to try to shorten it up, make it more succinct, which we did do. The implementation chapter, which we have added, was also the result of a comment that we got that said, this is a lot of information, but how are you going to make this work? And so we're currently in the process of figuring out the procedures and processes for that implementation plan. It then went through internal county review and steering committee review, and now is available to all for review on the website. And hopefully many of you have already taken a look at it. And if you haven't, we're going to tell you how to do that. It's basically in 2 parts. There's what we call the print version, although it's probably mostly going to be electronic. There's the print version, and then there's the interactive story map and hub site, which is where there's a lot of information in there. There's a lot of great documents about wildfire safety, and as well as, most importantly, the wildfire risk index and other maps that we've developed as part of the process. So at the end of the day, the CWPP is a comprehensive resource to help residents understand risk and undertake risk reduction work on private and public lands by hardening structures, reducing flammable vegetation in residential and wildland areas, and preparing for emergency. And it is really important that it encourages collaboration between residents, groups, and agencies across the county. So one of the most important things that we added to the CWPP from the 2016 version was the Wildfire Risk Index, which was the base layer of this is the hazard index, which we developed for the multiple jurisdiction hazard mitigation plan. So hazard is the inherent risk on the landscape of wildfire. Risk is when you add people, buildings, and human infrastructure. So the WRI looks at risk. It's a high-level model that only predicts relative wildfire risk. It's not a specific. The polygons in the wildfire are 100-acre polygons, so you can have a lot of different variety within each polygon. Not intended or suitable for parcel level analysis, but it does have a lot of value as a way to identify overall trends, which can then be used to suggest the need for and the nature of measures that can be taken to reduce risk to acceptable levels. There's a very detailed explanation of the WRI. There's a brief discussion in chapter 4, I think, of the document itself, but Appendix C has a very techie sort of thing that talks about all the inputs that were used for these development of both the hazard and the risk index. These are all on the website. If you wanted to look at the read about the hazard and look at the hazard index, it's here, the third from the top on the top row. But one of the things that I kind of want to run through with you really quick, because this is a really, really handy tool for any of you who are looking to do projects in the field. That's the WRI statistic, which is down here in the bottom left corner. When you pop on that, you're going to open up to a base map that's going to look like this. These are the projects that were entered last year in the CWPP process, which we'll be talking more about later. But the first thing you want to do is you can go up in the top corner here and you'll see a little layer box. And if you drop that down, you'll get this menu. And then you can use that to decide which layers that you want to see. What do you want to see in this? And then if you go through to the next slide, I went in and I took out the projects because I don't want to look at the other people's projects now, but I do want to look at the Wildfire Risk Index and a couple of other things, and that popped it up to here. Now, the really cool part is what comes next, which is that you can define your own polygon of any shape you want. And to do that, you're going to go up here in the top corner and you're going to grab the tool that looks kind of like a little, it's an exclamation point in a polygon. You're going to grab that, and when you grab that and pop on it, you're going to get this menu shows up across the bottom of your screen. And that has your drawing tools on it. So you can drop a pen, you can use a map to define an area, a pen to define an area randomly, or this is a tool I mostly use. You can use this little polygon tool where you can just click, 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 and it'll draw a polygon the size you want. So I went in and found a random area, popped up my magnification a couple of levels so I could see where I was, and drew this little polygon around this area, which includes all these black dots, which are houses. And then once it grinds around for a second, it will pop out all of this great data at the bottom next to where the drawing tools are. So what you're looking at here is the average wildfire risk index statistics across the project area. It'll also show you the fire hazard severity zone, which is CAL FIRE's mapping. Local responsibility area will also do that. But this next one is looking at population statistics. So how many people do we have in total in the area? What percentage is Hispanic? What percentage is below poverty line? So it'll pop those statistics out. And finally, this last box, which is the parcels impacted, this is super handy. On the map, what it will show is each of these assessor's parcel numbers will be attached to the appropriate black dot, and they're all listed across the screen, so you will know exactly what the parcel number for all of the parcels in your area are. So that can be a really, really handy thing when you're trying to do a project proposal. So I just wanted to run through that real quick, but I do encourage you to go to the website and take a look at the Wildfire Risk Index. Now about the document itself, in multiple chapters. Chapter 1 is basic information about the CWPP, requirements and goals, processes and procedures that we used. Chapter 2 is an overview of the county itself. So that's demographics, a discussion of WUI and what it means in Sonoma County, fire service organization, land use and ownership, codes and regulations pertaining to building and defensible space. Chapter 3 is wildfire history and house outward risk reduction strategies. So structure hardening, defensible space, and what you can do to increase safety on that near home level. Chapter 4 looks at wildland ecosystems, fire regimes, effective fire on natural landscapes. Chapter 5 is a brief discussion of the hazard and risk assessments that we just looked at. And again, Appendix C has the more detailed information, but this briefly describes what they do and how they do it. Chapter 6 is risk reduction priorities, and we'll be discussing a lot more about that in a minute. These priorities were identified during CWPP development in the meetings as response to surveys. And what we looked at were what are people's values that they most want to protect from wildland fire, and what are all the overall priorities for risk reduction and specific project recommendations. And we'll be talking about that in a second. Chapter 7 is newly added, and this is pertaining to implementation of projects. How do we best do this? How do we best prioritize projects so that we are spending money wisely and well across all of Sonoma County to reduce risks? And Chapter 8 is all the appendices. So about those risk reduction priorities. Chapter 6 not only has a list of projects that were suggested by people in meetings, but it also, we distilled all of that information into this list of overall project priorities. So these are the things that folks who were talking to us during the process, agencies, are all the things that we wanted to see addressed on a broad scale to reduce risk in Sonoma County. So those are projects that support access and functional needs population, that address ignition resistant construction and retrofit, protect critical infrastructure, encourage ecosystem health and biomass utilization. I'm not going to read this whole list, but I do really encourage you to pop into chapter 6.2 and take a look at all of these, which are more explained in that section. About that project list. So in 2021, we basically allowed projects to be listed in the CWPP as described by those who were seeking funding. Projects received a ranking score that was based on parameters, including how many of those risk reduction priorities that we just saw did the project specifically address in the project. And we ran into several issues with that. Number one, addressing multiple parameters doesn't necessarily make a project better. Making this sort of ranking system, it was sort of a little bit flawed at base, and so we've changed that. We also found things like there were folks who entered very large projects in without consulting very large property owners where the project was, and that caused some problems as well. So we really started looking at how we're doing this data entry. And we're revising how all that's going to work, and we'll be talking more about that. So we will end up with what we're now kind of calling the project tracker, priority project list. And basically, they're going to be kind of two buckets where folks can enter projects. There's what we call the easy button box, which are broad project ideas. They don't have to be fully scoped projects. There'll be a survey. You'll have to answer a series of basic questions, which are basically, what do you want to do? How do you want to do it? And where do you want to do it at base? So these are very broad project ideas, which hopefully will give us an idea who's interested in launching that project. And can we grab a bunch of these broad projects and scope them together into a larger collaborative project? And then we have another bucket which will be developed, which will be for fully developed projects. And these obviously are going to have a little more oomph as a project listing in a CWPP, because these are pretty fully developed, where you've considered CEQA, you have a fully developed budget, you have a timeline, you have property owner permission figured out. So there are going to be two options for how you enter those. The next step is going to be that all the projects that get entered will be evaluated. Project evaluation will be carried out by an evaluation committee whose membership may include members from a variety of technical advisory committees that are already stood up across the county, agencies, non-governmental organizations, other stakeholders that will provide a very broad spectrum of expertise and viewpoints to really look at the functionality and importance of these projects. Analysis will include an alignment with the CWPP risk reduction priorities, which we showed previously, as well as the overall risk in the project area. We will be making use of other tools as they're developed, such as the Wildfire Resilience Planner, which is being developed by UCCE and Sonoma Water, which will allow us to really get into some fine-grained detail on other values, environmental values, and other things that are going to impact these projects. So all of this will go into ranking projects. Until the evaluation project is complete, projects entered in the tracking tool will remain hidden from public view. Unlike last year, they're not going to all pop up on the map until we've taken a look at them and found out that, yeah, the property owner does know about this big project. And we've done that initial evaluation. After evaluation, eligible project will become visible. During evaluation, one of the other really important things we'll be doing is if we see really good projects that maybe need a little bit of help to develop them, we can also move those projects towards technical assistance that might be available from groups like the Open Space, Ag and Open Space District. So this is, I think, really going to help us develop a really good pipeline of projects. The evaluation committee will also do a trend and gap analysis so we can see very clearly if geographic areas are over or underrepresented on those maps. Are there 59 large-scale vegetation management projects and one near home and defensible space project? Then we'd want to encourage more of those near home projects in the future. Are access and functional needs populations and low income areas adequately represented in projects? And can we work to bring them into the process more completely? This will greatly encourage collaboration, provide for technical assistance, and to quote the California's Wildfire and Resilience Action Plan from the Governor's Forest Management Task Force, increase local and regional governments' capacity to build and maintain a pipeline of forest health and fire prevention projects. We really want to line up the CWPP to serve these broader needs as identified by the state, so that if money becomes available, we're there, we have projects, and we're ready to roll. So the projects from 2021 are still listed in the draft and in Appendix A. We'll be reaching out to those of you who entered projects in 21 to see if you want to have that project evaluated and listed into the new tracker. We'll be trying to see if we can port them over so that you don't have to do all that. We're not there yet, but we do thank you for your patience as we break really honestly new ground on figuring out how to accomplish this pretty complicated and difficult task of evaluating projects across the county in a collaborative way. So you can link to the priority project list. It's on the hub site, and we'll be sharing all of these later. So I hope you go in and take a look at that, but do know that the process is going to change. What's up there now is probably going to be very different within the next month or so. So if you think you're going to want to enter your project onto the CWPP, which is highly recommended if you're seeking funding from state or federal agencies, feel free to either pop us an email or put your name and email in the chat, and we can pop you an email when we're ready to start having people move projects into the list. Okay.
All right, back to me. So just to go over the review and signing process for the CWPP, we're holding 2 more public review meetings. Tonight's meeting is one of those 2. And we also have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow night. We are also going to be adding projects via the via the story map after the public review period ends, which is, and I can't emphasize this enough, we really want your comments in by this Sunday, so December 4th. Please add your comments to the public review draft. Otherwise we'll be closing it, and that's it. So next slide. And how you're going to comment on that. So this round we decided to do a Google Doc because we found it to be more user friendly than the last round that we did. That was a PDF and a slight disaster in regards to adding comments on. So we just wanted to make this as easy as possible for folks. So what you're going to do is you'll go to the CWPP website on the Permit Sonoma site. And I'll be sharing those links soon. And there'll be a big box. It'll have all the links that you need there. You just click on that Google link. Actually, I kind of set it up so I can just go ahead and share that link in the chat. You'll go to that link and all you have to do is just click that little comment button that's on the side of the CWPP doc and just write your comment. Next slide. So if you have an issue with adding a comment on the Google Doc, that's no problem. Just email us at permitsonoma-wildfireplan@sonoma-county.org. And we can send you a template. So we'll still ask you to use the Google Doc as a reference. So you can like copy and paste sections onto this template and you can write your comments there and then you can just send back that template to us. That way we have a more organized way of collecting your comments and suggestions. Next slide. So commenting on the CWPP. As much as we love encouraging comments about the CWPP on the CWPP, we really just want concise as possible comments about the CWPP. So if there's like a section that you have a question about or something that may, you're a little confused about or you don't think we cited something correctly, just leave that comment there. We appreciate any, this looks great, but we just really want something that we can implement into the final draft. We also really want to strive to integrate community values and ideas when it comes to the CWPP. And we're trying to balance multiple viewpoints and sticking to the requirements that the CWPP has. So those requirements, again, are that it's collaborative, that it identifies areas for hazardous fuel reduction and recommends types and methods of treatment, and that it recommends measures to reduce the ignitability of structures. So just keep in mind, we're doing a balancing act when it comes to making sure we integrate all community comments. Next. So again, cannot stress this enough. Public comments are due by December 4th. That is it. We'll then present it to the Board of Supervisors in February of next year. And once that's been signed, we'll annex it into the CWPP into the multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan when that's getting updated again. We'll then do, we'll do maintenance and project review as well. That's Caroleon had already mentioned. And that will include new local CWPP projects and updated mapping links. Next. Okay, again, just putting it out there one final time. Please comment. Please comment. Next. And now we're at the Q&A section. So if you have any questions, which I see there are, and Caroleon, there is already a question that we would love for you to answer. And that is from Jeffrey. Several areas of incorporated and unincorporated Sonoma County have completed local CWPPs and prioritized projects. My review of the draft seems to show that many or most of these local priorities have not been reflected in the countywide CWPP. Why not? And you're muted.
That was so good of me. Those local priorities, I think, are most appropriate for a local plan. If you, and one of the things that we're going to be doing very soon is popping requests out to all of those people who do have local plans to please take their top 3-5 projects and enter them into the CWPP in either the easy bucket or the complete project bucket at choice, because we do want them integrated into the plan. Also, as those plans are written, they are part of the CWPP. They're on, all of those local plans are included on the hub site. So they are integrated into the CWPP, but that's why you need a local plan, right? If I was going to try to incorporate all of the specific needs of all of the small communities across the county, it would make the countywide pretty ponderous. So that's why you have a local plan. And you can use that, but I would highly recommend that the folks who have written and maintained their local CWPPs do get their projects onto our project list.
And before we go any further, we just want to introduce a few people who may have already answered some of your questions in the Q&A chat. We got Roberta McIntyre from Fire Safe Sonoma, and Sashi, please correct me if I'm wrong, Sabaratanam from UC, oh, there it is, from UC Cooperative Extension. And they both have been pretty Carleon's like saviors when it comes to the CWPP. So they're here to answer any of your questions as well. So I see Rue Birch asked if there is any funding for road improvements for emergency escape routes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was multitasking. What was the question?
Is there funding? Is there funding for road improvements for emergency escape routes?
Again, the CWPP is a pathway to funding. It is not funding, right? So there are grants that you could write a grant for if that is a justifiable project for your area. Absolutely, there are grant projects, grant programs that will fund emergency evacuation routes on roadsides. What the CWPP, and that is one of the priorities that's in our priority list, is roadside stuff. So if you write up a proposal and you put it in, then you can go out and seek funding from the variety of funders that are out there that fund those kinds of projects.
Roberta, I saw you had your hand up. Was that for a specific reason?
Yeah, I was gonna just comment on Carleon's comment earlier about putting the projects into the project tool. So just so you guys know, even if Fire Safe Sonoma has help with a local plan, we don't enter projects for you or on your behalf. So if you have plans, if you have projects in your local plan, then you have to actually prioritize those and put those in, as Carleon mentioned. So they're not in there unless you put them in there.
Thank you, Roberta. That was a really important comment.
Christina, somebody, I think you may have answered this, wanted to know whether they could see all the answered questions. Are they able to see on that second tab there?
I went ahead and made it available for everyone. So if you don't, please directly message me and let me know. But everyone should see the answered questions.
And Carleon, there were several questions asking about how the CWPP Wildfire Risk Index might be, whether it's going to be used by other entities other than Sonoma County, like Cal OES or Cal Fire or FEMA. And the answer I gave, which I think you might want to, develop further, was those entities use their own criteria to evaluate their grants, and that this was a specially developed index with finer scale data and more information than is available in other parts of the state and federally. So just thought you might want to comment a little further on what was special about the Wildfire Risk Index and why it's not necessarily something that others are going to use because it was developed for Sonoma County.
Yeah, it was developed specifically to address the issues that we're seeing in Sonoma County and provide us a base layer so that we're better at determining where the highest level of risks are in that relative way that it works. everybody else, CAL FIRE, and I see Marshall Turbeville is in the room. He might be able to talk a little bit about the updated fire hazard severity zone mapping. CAL FIRE is in the process of updating that now. They use their own mapping and risking systems, as do the insurance companies. So nobody is going to be using this, so far as I know, outside of the county, although it's freely available, people can. But most of those entities, especially insurance, they have their own risk mapping systems that they use to make determinations. And they're not going to be influenced by this one, most likely.
We have 2 more questions. One's from Herman. It's for timberland owners who are not connected with some of these nonprofits applying for larger projects. How do we get included? Being a single timberland parcel owner for me has been very difficult to find support. Seems that those connected appear to be first in line with their projects. How are you addressing single parcel property owners to find grants to also assist them?
Well, by definition, most grants are not written for single property owners. They are written for agencies or groups like fire safe councils or others where you're having multiple properties which are being addressed, for these things. There are single property things that you can take advantage of if you have more than 10 acres, such as CAL FIRE CFIP program, which will give you a forest management plan and a variety of things. But one of, I think, the most challenging things in Sonoma County's landscape is this highly fragmented forest ecosystem that we have, which is owned by this guy, that guy, that guy, this guy, this guy. And so it's actually really hard to do large scale projects that have wide ranging ecological and fuels reduction benefits. And so if you can join up with some of your neighbors so that you make a larger group to go after some grant funding, I think that would be good. I believe your property is in the Sweetwater Springs area, as I recall, which I believe is in a project area that for a project that Permits Sonoma is launching, that you might want to check out, the hazardous fuels projects that Misha can talk about more knowledgeably than I. But yeah, in community is strength, I think.
Awesome. David asked, what is the status of the 38 million / $50 million BRIC grant? When and where will the plans for those funds be publicly available? Based on the FEMA grant, what are the specific areas of the county which will benefit from these funds? I think Misha could be the go-to for this question.
Sure. Thanks for the question. Yes, lots of clarification needed out there about the BRIC project. So actually, before yesterday, the answer would have been Sonoma County's BRIC project, which we applied for in 2020, was not awarded. It has not been awarded yet and was pending further review. As of yesterday, that has now changed, and FEMA has just, and Cal OES has just awarded phase 1 of the BRIC BRIC project. So even though President Biden announced it last year, that was before FEMA had formally awarded it. So the next steps and the time, and again, to underscore the BRIC project, Sonoma County's BRIC project is called Wildfire Resilient Sonoma County. So the project name is Wildfire Resilient Sonoma County. And that project applied for funding to do defensible space, home hardening, and landscape scale vegetation management in 3 specific areas of the county. So the work will be conducted in 3 parts of the county. And as soon as we can, we'll be rolling out, program area maps so that parcel owners can learn if they're in the project area. That will probably take a couple of months. So the first phase of the project and the piece that was awarded is the planning phase. where we're going to do defensible space assessments, home hardening assessments, and site identification for vegetation management in the 3 project areas. That's going to take 18 plus months. And then after that point, we'll be beginning what we're calling the rebate program, where property owners will be able to apply. And again, that's specifically for those program areas.
Which broadly are in the lower Russian River, Rio Neto, Guerneville, Gernwood Park, Larkfield, Wickiup, and near Pengrove, which we chose those 3 very different areas very purposefully because they are so different in so many ways. Because what we want the BRIC to do is apply the best available science to what do we do to reduce risk in these highly at-risk communities. And if we can apply that expertise in those 3 areas, we're basically hitting most of the situations that you're going to hit throughout the county, from old houses stuck in the redwood forest to rebuilt homes that got hammered in 2017 to Pengrove, which is in a grassland ecosystem. So that was one of the reasons that we did that. And our overall goal is to continue marching with this kind of program into the future, adding new areas so that we can really make a large scale difference for the residents of our county in increasing resilience to wildfire into the future. So that's sort of our overall goal. One thing that I always like to kind of mention about that too is that $50 million is such an enormous sounding amount of money. It's hard for me to get my head around what that is until I think of it this way. One of the groups in my neighborhood recently did a road clearing project on about 5 miles of road, 30 feet from the side of the road. That project cost $1 million. And that was a pretty small project. And when you start extrapolating those numbers out, that $50 million, while it sounds like it's enough to do everything we need to do forever, it's really not. And so it's a base project that we're hoping will grow over time.
And the award that came yesterday was for $7.6 million, which is the planning element of that. We're saying 50 million, but it's 48.8 million. So the first phase of the project, the planning phase, is what was awarded for 7.6 million, and a press release will be coming out tomorrow or the day after.
So you guys all heard it first. Any other questions? Panelists, anything you want to add about the CWPP?
Yeah, I think there's been a ton of work by so many people, and principally, of course, Carolyn Safford, who has devoted a great portion of her life and personal time to putting this together. But the purpose of a community wildfire protection plan is to have as she put up there, there's sort of 3 points, to have a plan that's collaboratively developed between the community and all government agencies involved in order to figure out ways to reduce structure ignitability and reduce hazardous fuels. And in doing that, you have these priorities that have been collaboratively developed through the processes that many of you were involved in. And you have a list of priority projects that inclusion in a CWPP allows you to apply for grants. There are a lot of grant programs, as Carolyn mentioned, that require that you have some connection to the priorities of a CWPP or are included in the priority project list. So it's a tool to be able to bring together what's important to the community and align all those different parts together. It's not really a county plan in the sense of the county of Sonoma. It's a county plan in the sense of all the entities in the county of Sonoma kind of coming together to collaboratively develop some priorities. So this is really the culmination of the community's work here, and all of you who are here are the people who need to comment and make sure that your thoughts are included in that, and that this can be used on an ongoing basis to continue the work that everybody here is really passionate about doing.
Thanks, Sashi. All right, we got 15 minutes left. Any more questions? Otherwise, we can call it an early night. I'm gonna go ahead and just share my screen really quick, just to show some of the links that we have. Sorry, let me just keep going. Okay, so if you have, this is the link to the Sonoma County project page. And then that's the link to the hub site. You'll find this all on the project page for on permitsonoma.org/Sonoma County-CWPP. This is also, sorry, that's the incorrect link for the public draft, but I'll make sure to fix that. But the correct link is on the project page. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at permitsonoma-wildfireplan@sonoma-county.org. We are happy to answer any of your questions, or if again you don't want to comment on the Google Doc, that's totally fine. We can send you a template.
I see a follow-up question from David on the brick that I can just verbally answer.
Okay.
So David, your question asks about the match portion of the $7.6 million award that came yesterday. And the 7.6 million figure is the total amount of what's called phase 1 for the brick project. So 25% of that, approximately, there's some other complications there, but approximately 25% of that is the local match portion, 25% of 7.6 million. And if you have any other questions, feel free to raise your hand and we can just answer that verbally.
Cool. And then Carrie Winiger is asking to be added to that list for notifications whenever projects are submitted. So I'll send you that info.
Yeah, so we'll just pop you an email when we have the buckets ready for you to throw your jewels into them.
All right.
Thank you, Carrie.
Okay. Well, I guess we can call it early. Thank you again, everyone, for your time. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening.